Dear listeners, this is the third part of this story. If you haven't seen the past part, we recommend you watch them first. There was something banging downstairs. I looked at my watch. It was 10:30. Yes. My father and I had played well last night, as they say, from the heart. I took my time, got dressed, and scratching my stomach went down to the first floor. My father was sitting in the kitchen with a large coffee cup in his hand. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee swirled around him rose to the ceiling. "Good morning, Dad." I searched my eyes for a clean mug. "Good morning. Sit down." "I just made coffee." Dad reached for the coffee pot. "The matchmaker called. He said that he and Natasha would be here in an hour to pick up her things." Dad poured coffee into a cup and put it in front of me. "Should I stay with you?" "Yes. Daddy, stay." I suddenly found it hard to talk. I suddenly realized that only now I was beginning to understand the horror of what had happened. Until then, everything that had happened seemed to me like a nightmare dream. As if it hadn't happened to me. We had lived in love for 30 years. What happened? Why did she do this to me? Calm down, Yura, pull yourself together. This is not the end of life. My father looked at me and his eyes shone treacherously. He loved his daughter-in-law very much, and I understood that this was not easy for him either. Be a man and act like a man. My father got up and began to wash his mug. It was clear that he was trying to occupy himself with something to hide his pain. "Mom will be here in a moment." My father put the mug on the shelf and turned to me. "She wants to look Natasha in the eye." "Why, Daddy? Why didn't you tell her not to come? I feel bad enough as it is, and now Mom." I really felt bad, and I didn't want to see my mother cry. "We're adults. We'll figure it out on our own." My father was silent. He just sighed. I heard a car drive up through the open window sash. The gate was knocked and my mother appeared on the path leading to the house. She came into the kitchen and kissed me on the cheek, sending me with expensive French perfume. "Do you have any coffee left?" Mom sat down on the stool and put her purse on the table. "Hello. Mom, let me pour. I got a cup. When are they coming?" Mom looked at my father. "It won't be long now. Sit down. I'll go get my laptop." I went up to the bedroom, Natasha in tears, and her father sat opposite me and her mother. Behind me, in the chair behind me, my father was seated. I put my laptop on the table, sat down with a sigh, and looked at my wife, who was staring at the floor, afraid to look at me. From her concentrated face, it was clear that she was desperately trying to gather her thoughts. "Natasha, you wanted to talk. I'm listening to you." I tried my best to remain calm. "Ira, I owe you an apology. Or rather, to everyone." She began, raising her head. "I can't find the words to say how much I regret what I did and how ashamed I am. There is no excuse for what I did. Yuro, I beg you. Give me a chance to make it up to you. I only loved you and I only love you. It was only sex with him." It was like I had lost my mind, living in a parallel reality. The words came out of her mouth like dry peas. I especially liked the passage about the parallel reality. Probably read fiction. "If you give me the opportunity, I'll do everything in my power to fix it." Natasha had already started to repeat herself. I turned my laptop and pressed the key. "Yes. Yes. I love you. Hear me. I love you. God, my impotent man is no match for you," came from the speaker's hoarse with passion voice. "Natasha, you just say the word, and I'll leave him and be with you, only with you." Then the distinctive sounds of unearthly love could be heard. I stopped the playback and looked at my wife. She seemed only now to realize the magnitude of what she had done. Reality came crashing down on her like a derailed freight train. Natasha sobbed, not knowing what to do or even what to think. She knew she had to do something but could not find the right words. I stood up. Rage and resentment were choking me. Natasha, tell me, how does it feel to know that you were just played with and not loved? Weren't you? Just another haul to that jerk? And for that kind of love, you ruined our family? How does that feel? Bitch. Do you hate me that much? She looked at me through her tears. I don't hate you. Hate takes effort. You're nothing to me now. You're not there for me. You even managed to turn the children against me. When my mother heard those words, she flinched and looked at me with pity. But I'm your wife, Natasha said, weeping and sobbing. Shut up. I cried out in anger. I will not allow you to besmirch my wife's good name. My wife of 30 years was a loving and caring woman, my best friend who had my back and the mother of my children. She's dead. You're the cunt who took over her body. Don't talk like you had anything to do with her. It was several minutes before she spoke again. What am I supposed to do now? Do you really want to hear my answer? I almost calmed down. The worst thing you could have done for our marriage was to cheat on me, ruining our family for a piece of shit like this jerk. You've lost my respect, not to mention my love. As soon as the kids find out the truth, they won't respect you either because you're a whore. Just looking at you makes me sick. I'm bitter that I wasted 30 years of my life loving a bitch like you. I'm sorry. Natasha fell to her knees, grabbing my legs. Her father picked his daughter up under his arms, trying to lift her up. I couldn't bear it. It's hard to throw away from your heart the person you've loved for 30 years. I had only one wish, that she should leave my house as soon as possible. As she was leaving, her father came up to me, shook my hand and said, "Thank you for letting me talk. I'll take it from here." My heart was pounding in my throat. It became difficult to breathe. I felt a fire burning in my chest, rising to my head. An unbearable pain suddenly pierced my body. The moon hovering over the trees shone with a slightly fluttering silvery light, and I made my way to the road with relative ease. The tall pines covered the sky with their crowns, but the moonlight that fell on the old, weedy guesthouse was enough to keep me on my way. I had taken a few steps when I felt someone's gaze behind me. I turned around sharply. About 5 meters from me on the road was a girl of 7 dressed in a light white dress with ruffles and lace. She stood silently looking at me. My first thought was, why is there a child here at this late hour? I took a step toward the girl. Are you lost? Want me to walk you home? The girl said nothing. And where are your parents? I tried to get the child to talk. The girl indefinitely pointed her hand in the direction of the forest. Don't worry. I'll walk you home. I went towards the girl and tried to take her hand. But she somehow imperceptibly to my sight moved away from me. I took a few more steps, but the distance between me and the girl did not shrink. I could see her white dress shimmering silver in the moonlight. It even seemed to me that the moonlight was brighter. Suddenly, the girl raised her hands and unclasped her hands. Butterflies fluttered out of her fingers. They were big and bright red, and they flew upward, spiraling like bright leaves blown away by the wind. They disappeared into the dark sky a little more. I involuntarily looked at the butterflies and looked again for the girl, but she disappeared. I tried to run down the road, but my legs felt like they were falling through the absorbent cotton. I involuntarily jerked and began to fall into a deep black well, and night fell. First, the sound came back. I heard some hissing, and someone's voice said, "He's coming around." Ridiculous. Was I going somewhere out of my mind? I went for a walk and came back. Well, guys, the pranksters, how they come up with what? You can stand or fall. I opened my eyes. The bright light stabbed my pupils, causing my eyelids to involuntarily close. My first question was, where am I? I opened my eyelids again. Everything around me was white. The walls, the ceiling. I turned my head and squinted my eyes, and the floor is white too. It looks like a hospital. My eyes gradually became accustomed to the bright light. There were wires, rubber tubes, and a clothespin on my finger. My brain worked slowly, struggling to digest the information. "Yuri, can you hear me?" asked me the same voice. I nodded my head. What happened? It was difficult for me to speak. My town felt like wood. "Don't worry. You're in the hospital. Everything is already good." The kind uncle stroked my arm. "You are in intensive care, but tomorrow, you will be transferred to a normal room." What is wrong with me? I repeated the question. My heart could not cope with the stress. "You've developed atrial fibrillation. It's simple. Your heart rhythm has collapsed. A heart attack." No. 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 The doctor almost crossed himself. "It's just a malfunction of the rhythm. Just lie down for a week and then go home. And the most important thing is that you absolutely must not worry. Rest and only rest. Good for him. Don't worry." My life's gone to hell. The difficult events of the last few days came rushing into my head. A nurse came into the room. She leaned over and said something softly to the doctor. "Yuri, your father and mother are here." The doctor smiled and adjusted the sliding blanket. "You can talk, but just do not worry." The door to the room creaked open. "Yara, hello. How are you?" My father kissed me on the cheek. "You made us nervous." Behind his back stood my mother, crying. My dad carefully put a bag on the nightstand. "Here are some fruit, juice. They don't allow anything else yet." I smiled and nodded. "Thank you. Do not worry. Everything is fine. I'll be going home soon." I try to make my voice cheerful to reassure my parents. The doctor came into the room. "Goodbye. Yuri needs rest." My mother kissed me on the cheek and sobbed. Dash. "Get well, Arachka. We're waiting for you." While I was lying in the hospital, I had visitors. First, my former colleagues, even the head of the department came to visit me, then friends. My parents came every day. There came a moment when I wanted to go home to get away from the non-committal visits. I had already walked around and even smoked secretly on the stairs. A couple of times. Somehow, a familiar face flashed in the corridor. It was the alpha of the neighborhood. But he didn't really look like an alpha. It was good, though. I got him. Good job. Next to my neighbor was an unassuming, lanky-looking guy. He was saying something to the sufferer holding a tape recorder in front of him. I knew the worm. He was a captain in the investigative committee. I remembered him from my work, so they are still digging. Of course, my wife is involved in this case. So sooner or later, they'll come to me. On the other hand, I haven't been reported, so there's no case. As they say, no body, no case. But there is a body and it's still alive. I spit. It's all gloomy. I watched my friends for a while and then went to my room. I returned home on Friday. My heart was beating evenly. On Monday, I filed for divorce. I didn't hide the reason: adultery. Natasha and I had nothing much to divide. Our children were adults. So the divorce was supposed to go smoothly. By the way, about the children, neither son nor daughter came to see me in the hospital. Apparently, they held a grudge for their mother. Well, that hurts, of course. But I will not impose. If I could not for 30 years to bring them up decent people, now it is too late. And besides, a mother is a mother. Especially since they know for sure that Natasha is their mother. But there are questions about me. And I've got them too. A woman doesn't become a all of a sudden. It's a gradual process. So there is no guarantee that both children are mine. I didn't dwell on that thought. Mine aren't mine. What difference does it make? I don't have a family anymore anyway. It would be a shame if the children were mine that I had left number one behind. and my lifeline would be interrupted. After all, my children give me reason to think that I did not smoke the sky for nothing. I had the material for the DNA test. I brought everything I needed to the lab and paid the money. Now all I had to do was wait. I was sitting in my studio on an old leather sofa I had recently brought from an antique store playing my guitar. The light from the switched-on floor lamp formed a bright circle, which was showing the edge of the carpet hanging on the brick wall and a piece of unpainted floor from the darkness. I took another sip of whiskey and ran the strings. Sad and nasty in the shower. Autumn always brings sadness, and this one, especially. I was left without a wife, without children. Life no longer made sense. There was no DNA results yet, but I was getting used to the idea that I was no longer a husband or a father. The doorbell rang. I went upstairs and looked through the peephole. There were my kids standing on the porch. "What do you want?" I tried not to raise my voice. "Let us in." "We want to talk." My son always tried to sound reasonable. I opened the door. They stopped in the hallway. My daughter sat down on the ottoman. "We want to know why you drove Mom away." Julia was the first to speak. "Ask her." I shrugged my shoulders. "We asked, now we want to hear from you." Yura spoke up. "We have a right to know." I already said. "Ask your mother." I was beginning to boil over their behavior. "Well, what will leave you alone?" "All right. We'll be with your mother. We want you to know that we think what you did was despicable. Everyone is entitled to a mistake and to forgiveness." Jira looked at his sister. "We have nothing more to say to you, and nothing you say is of any interest to us anymore. You are completely cut out of our lives." It was very clear. I was silent. I had nothing to say to them. Julia got up and went to her room. After a while, she came out with a backpack in her hand. "I thought I had the best father in the world, but now I realize what you really are, and I don't want anything more to do with you." She walked up to her brother and he took the backpack from her hands. "What you did to Mom was the most disgusting and unimaginable thing I could ever think of. I never want to see you again. I don't have a father anymore." You returned to his sister. "Come on. He makes me sick." Through the window, I saw them come down from the porch and walk to the gate. I deleted their numbers from my phone memory. But I could never delete them from my memory. The divorce went smoothly. Our aunt, tortured by life, handed us the divorce certificate and stamped our passports. Natasha tried to talk to me a few more times, but I hung up on her. There was no point. I never saw my children again. They cut me out of their lives. They didn't communicate with my parents either. Seriosha, the alpha neighbor, and his family had moved out before the new year. I was not interested in his fate. I was only glad that he was unlikely to recover from his wounds. I did not inform his wife and father-in-law about the adventures of their husband and son-in-law. He had had enough. I stood looking at myself in the mirror. A bearded grandfather. What had I brought myself to? Well, what? As the great Mao Zedong said, "Love comes and goes, but you always want to eat." It was time to strike a new chord in my life. Dear